there, and welcome back for another one of our San Diego Comic-Con prep videos. This time it is my favorite topic of anything to do with Comic-Con, the exhibit hall floor. So once again, as in past years, if you follow along with us, we got our trusty Wizarding World wand here, and we're going to look at the floor and kind of give some suggestions, some thoughts on what we have with the exhibit hall this year. One thing to note off the top, obviously with 3 years since the last Comic-Con and a whole world of change, like in every way possible, it really is hard to predict what the floor is going to give us this year in terms of, you know, from exclusives, swag, the lines, all of those things. But we will do our best to kind of get ready and talk about some of the things that we do know about it. So let's start off with just the accessing the floor. If you watched our other prep videos at the convention center, we showed kind of the everything else line and things like that. So making our way into the exhibit hall floor, you will be using the everything else line. Now let's talk about the morning. If you're coming later in the afternoon or after that initial rush in the morning, I mean, you can just enter anywhere. All of these doors will be open and you can just come right through the front of the convention center. But if we're going to talk about like lining up early, I mean, for us, we are not early people at Comic-Con. We're like 7 a.m. people. There's a lot of people that are like 2 a.m. people, and I don't think there's anything in terms of the exclusive world or swag world that's going to make us 2 a.m. people this year that I've seen so far. But, you know, when we get there, we are getting there around that 7 a.m. time or 6:30 or whatever it might be in that time. And so we are getting in the everything else line, and we're being fed upstairs. And so we talked about that in the last video. But just to kind of track back on that, you'll be coming in, going upstairs. So we're going to be on the floor above all of this. And ultimately, you're going to have a choice when you come to past Ballroom 20 of either going right to the Sales Pavilion, and the Sales Pavilion is like right above here, above Small Press Pavilion, and these are going to be escalators right here that you'll use to access the floor. Or you'll hook around Ballroom 20 to enter over by Hall H. You'll come down these escalators and be coming in that Lobby G area there by Artist Alley. So those are the two choices for the vast a multitude of people coming in. There also, though, is the entry at Hall A, or Lobby A. That is for those that have ADA. And so for ADA access is Hall A. Now, one thing just to note off the top here, we have people coming from A, from the small press side here, and then from G. And normally, a lot of the bodies are converging right here. There's a good reason why these booths are here. It draws everybody in there. So something to kind of remember just in terms of as things crowd up in the morning. Now, as you're making your choice, a lot of times people make the choice of either lining up in the Sales Pavilion or going down over to the G area. They base that usually on the idea of, are they hitting more of these booths or more of these over here? And so for us, this is kind of our greatest area of interest, so we're usually more the people coming this way. But, you know, some people want to go straight to that Marvel booth, and it's obviously a shorter walk right there than coming from over here. Also, obviously, throughout all these booths, I mean, we have ones that are indicated by names like Lego and Mattel and Marvel, but obviously every booth at Comic-Con is pretty incredible. I mean, it takes so much work for exhibitors to be able to come to Comic-Con. It is not a cheap trip to be able to, you know, hotels and everything else. And so we always encourage hitting every booth, and that's exactly what we do every year. We've never missed going through every single booth at Comic-Con, if not twice, at least one time of making sure to go through. But that said, again, we're going to talk about some kind of basic strategies here of the floor and kind of, you know, some of these bigger booths and how to work with them. So now, once you've made your choice to come over here for that G entry or above Small Press Pavilion in Sales, do remember the goal for Comic-Con International has been in the past always to open at 9 a.m. So it says 9:30, and this is very similar if you're familiar with like In-N-Out Burger. It always says 10:30, but the goal is to open at 10 a.m., or at least it has been for a long time. And so the same thing here. Now, these people that are coming later, so let's say you get there at 9:20, you're probably just going to wait at one of these doors at B or C or something like that. And you're going to see people running around in here, and that's because they came through and lined up earlier this way. But at 9:30, then these doors will open and people will come that way. So if you want to avoid a lot of the kind of hustle and bustle of the morning, the best thing is just to wait till like 10 if you're, you know, wanting to do that. But for those that are trying to do that initial run, you know, you are going to want to get there on the earlier side there. So for us, we're normally coming in over this side, as I said, and I'll be honest, that entry in that first 10 or 15 minutes of a morning on Comic-Con, on a Comic-Con day, is really some of my favorite time of the entire year, definitely of the entire convention. I just love the feeling of coming onto the floor and just not knowing what we'll see, what sort of freebies, what sort of, whether it's photo ops, cool displays, exclusives, etc. I just love the idea of being able to bounce around these booths. And during that time, when they first open, I'm really bouncing pretty frenetically, just trying to look for fun, new, interesting things that don't have long lines. What I know is by about 9:30, though, that all goes away because all these people storm in and then everything has a long line. And so we're usually almost ready to take a break by like 10 a.m. But let's kind of go and look at these things. So let's go back to Sales Pavilion, though. So if we are entering here, to clarify again, the escalators are going to bring you down right about here into small press. If you're interested in the gaming side of the convention, obviously you'll make your way over here towards the Hall A side. Nintendo, Blizzard, Capcom, these demand big lines. A lot of people are checking those booths out throughout the day there, and they can get quite busy. Obviously UCC is there as well. Marvel, I think, is one of the biggest draws for people entering from the small press pavilion side. But additionally, it's not that far off to make your way over to Lego or Mattel. So a lot of people will come in this way and do that. Now, one thing to note as you're coming down the escalator, like if we're coming down this way, one of the things we're always trying to do is look at how many bodies are in front of us. Because a lot of people will hit here and just come straight in or straight there. And so a lot of times we'll kind of zigzag. Sometimes I'll even go out and around just to try to be able to get around people because there's so much crowding potentially there. And so it's just a matter of really looking what's in front of you and kind of, not getting stuck in a place too long there. And again, also depending on what your end destination is. Now, a booth like Sideshow, they have given out like $25 gift cards in the past, and that's been kind of a fun swag thing to grab in the morning. But for us, Sideshow's really a booth we try to do at the end of the day usually, because we want to get photos of a lot of the statues or video and things. And so that's not something we're trying to do as much at the open of the day as the end of the day. And so again, though, depending on what your goal there is, will, inform that decision there. Let's swing over to the other side of the floor and talk about coming in here. So here we're coming down the escalator right above Hall H, and we're feeding in over here. And again, you have Artist Alley. And here there's a lot more avenues to travel than over at the Sales Pavilion version, because here you have people going that way, that way, that way. The whole Funkville thing back here, I mean, we know we're going to have a lottery back there, but there'll probably still be a lot of people that maybe don't even know that there's a lottery. They're heading straight back there. Funko's always going to attract people going there first thing in the morning, even if they may not be able to line up at the booth, and they might see, oh, maybe they're going to be giving away swag or whatever it might be. But again, for me, this is kind of like the part of the floor I like the most, because there's just so many different booths doing different things, and you don't know who's going to be the surprise booth giving out a really cool bag or whatever items they might be for of freebies. Now, again, this year we don't know really what to expect with those. I was shocked, and speaking of, we have Bandai right in the middle here, and they've got kind of an increased presence this year with Hasbro only reducing to one booth. But Bandai was one of many booths at Anime Expo this year that was giving out more swag than we've ever seen at Anime Expo. So, I don't know if that's going to translate to Comic-Con or not, but I thought it was really interesting seeing so much more given out there in terms of like bags and posters and backpacks and just all sorts of fun things there. Now, some differences with the booths this year, obviously, Fox TV going away, and we've got Disney Plus instead. Now, what does that exactly look like? What are they giving away there? We don't know. Will there be a Mandalorian display there? I wouldn't think likely, honestly, that they don't have a lot of presentation of the kind of Star Wars side of things. And if anything, it seems like it would fit more over in the Lucasfilm Pavilion. But we don't really know. They may be giving away some of the best stuff of the weekend, and it's tough to know what that's going to be. Obviously, a huge absence here of the WB booth, and that was a big draw for a lot of people. So one thing about that, even if the WB booth was never your stop, just remember that sucked a lot of people over that direction. A lot of people that probably are going to swing over this way as well in that very beginning of the morning. Now, Netflix returns to the floor. I liked their booth back the last time they were on the convention center floor there. They had some great Defenders, Marvel's Defenders posters, and like Stranger Things back in the day and stuff like that. Dragon Ball is going pretty big. They've got the concert and the screening and stuff like that this year, so I would imagine they're going to represent pretty well there. Nickelodeon always has a really fun booth. Now coming back to Hasbro, big difference here. Normally you've got the two Hasbro booths, this being the display booth of upcoming product reveals, things like that. And then over here being the toy shop. Well, the toy shop is gone, and that's really disappointing. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Conversely, we can look at Mattel. They've got both booths, so that can tell us right here, despite not having any real announcements yet, as of the recording of this video at least, they're going to be selling, because they've got their two locations. They've got their display booth, and they've got their selling booth. Most likely, you can imagine they'll be selling things on site if they dedicated this much space. Whereas Hasbro, it sounds like they're going with a model similar to Star Wars Celebration, which is QR codes. Now, are they going to make people line up for the QR codes? Not sure. We're not even sure what they're doing with the QR codes or what they're going to be selling yet for these pre-order things. At Celebration, it was just like they were handing them out. At least when we went by, every time we went by, it was like, hey, do you want one of these? And it was like, nah, I'm good, I got one. So I don't think it's going to be a super competitive situation there. I think if there was, they would have some other lineup system, like maybe up in Sales Pavilion to get your QR code, but it does remain to be seen. It is a huge change there. Now, Bandai, this Gundam booth is going to be a must-see, and it's going to be a busy spot, but it is some beautiful booth work that they're going to have there. And so I definitely suggest, even if it's not something that you're doing right at the beginning of the show, make sure to kind of swing by there and see at some point. Also over here to note, as we stick in kind of that Disney side of thing, you've got FX, ABC, Hulu. I mean, obviously Disney owns so many different media properties now, so you've got kind of the Disney block going on over here in that sector of the spot. No Walking Dead or AMC booth there. That's a big change, obviously. No Dark Horse. That's a big change. Obviously, DC had combined with WB. What was it, 2019, and none of that booth. I mean, that's another kind of disappointment in the company there, that WB has decided not to have DC there. It just is a real strange thing to do, but it is what it is, and these are strange times, and we've got to expect some strange things from the floor. Lucasfilm Pavilion is always fun to look at in terms of the photo ops. I would imagine whatever's there for photo ops will also be at D23 Expo, so if you're going to D23 Expo, you probably don't need to worry too much about any of those really crowded photo ops. That said, to us, the pavilion itself has been kind of, a bit boring over the years. It feels like it's had kind of a real kind of almost swap meet feel to it, with a lot of really just random booths, just kind of anything with a Star Wars sticker stuck onto it. But still, at the same time, I mean, we're big Star Wars fans, so we always make sure to go through there, but it just seems to get really clogged up, and it's been a long time since we found too much of interest there. Lego, we have yet to hear what they're doing, whether they're doing minifigs drawings again, which will probably be up in the Sales Pavilion area, what sort of exclusives. Would imagine with this big booth in the usual place that we can expect business as usual. Do remember with Lego, if you're waiting on announcements from them, they are always pretty late when it comes to Comic-Con announcements, so I wouldn't worry too much that we haven't heard much from them. Viz went big at Anime Expo. I would imagine they're going to go big here as well. Over here, Factory Entertainment, Super 7, Entertainment Earth, all great booths with a number of different licenses that they all tie into. You're going to find cool things from all of your favorite IPs at those spots, but usually not necessarily booths that are the busiest, at least in our experience, that kind of, again, not something rivaling, let's say, a Hasbro or a Lego or something like that. IDW's got this nice big space. They've got a bunch of great stuff that they always do there, and I'm glad to see they have such a large presence there. Now, as we get over to this side, it's kind of a lot of times a little more haphazard in terms of, like, if we're talking about the swag side, like we find a real concentration of it usually in here, even though some of the booth names may be different, and we'll see if any of that holds true this year. But sometimes we'll find freebies over at Diamond, or, Image has some great signings there and things like that, although they've kind of reduced the presence of Skybound over there this year. That's been announced as well. Same thing with Oni's kind of a reduced presence in some degree there. Now, notice with Marvel, a second booth over here for sales too. So it is interesting just to kind of take a step back for a second to the whole, like, well, Marvel and Disney, they're not going to have anything to do with Comic-Con. There's been the virtual times, there's D23 Expo, and we look and we've got Marvel doubled over here. We've got the Disney Plus booth. We've got the ABC, the Hulu FX, the announcements with Disney TV panels and all that. A big presence for Disney, like a really big presence for Disney, even with D23 Expo this year. So hopefully that's not something we hear every 2 years of so much doubt about Disney's presence. It can change, as with any of these booths, at any time. but it's not something that's necessarily dictated by just the D23 Expo there. Now, as we zoom out a little bit here, some things to point out about some general areas as well. Over here, we've got our artist alley. There are so many incredibly talented artists there. I mean, it is a real who's who of artists from across the globe. And it's just staggering, some of the artists that'll be there, sometimes not that busy. That would be like the headliner at another convention. And so it's really something to behold there. So definitely suggest, again, taking time with all of these booths, but make sure, you know, the Stylin' Online, we love the Tower of Shirts ourselves, but at the same time, don't get too distracted by that and miss out on some really talented artists in there. Kind of a hodgepodge of types of booths here, as well as a lot of times over here. You do get a lot of the publishing going on over here, which is great. Small Press Pavilion, a ton of great indie creators in there. I mean, you're going to find so many one-of-a-kind things on the Comic-Con floor, no matter what, but particularly I think in Small Press Pavilion, you're going to see a lot of that there that's going to really just, you know, grab your attention, a lot of one-of-a-kind things. Over here, we'll find a little bit more, a lot of times in kind of the vintage toy category, or just secondary market toys as well, if you're looking for, you know, somewhat recent Marvel Legends, Black Series, things like that. And then the Gold and Silver Pavilion, a lot of our comics there, trades, paperbacks, but particularly in the Gold and Silver, you're going to see a lot of amazing museum quality type comic books there. One thing to remember as we're talking about some of these types of booths, because these are some of the booths that we might expect to see at some other conventions if you're an attendee of a lot of conventions like we are, there will be booths in this area in particular that we'll see at 2-3 other conventions a year. And a lot of times the prices will be a little bit more at San Diego. And one thing to remember about that, because some people complain about this sort of thing, but just remember, again, just as it is as an attendee, a pricey thing to go to. It's a, you know, from hotels, travel, everything else. It is the same for the exhibitors. It is such a big commitment of time and money that we can't fault them for charging an extra $5-10 on a Black Series figure. It doesn't mean necessarily you're going to buy it, but it is something. I know when I come to San Diego, I just try to remember with all that stuff to kind of throw out the door. Things like sometimes we'll hear people say, oh, it was, you know, cheaper on eBay. Well, everything is going to, for the most part, be cheaper on eBay than it's going to be at the Comic-Con floor, because there's no need for travel. There's no need for anything. You just can go jump on your phone and start listing things there or whatever. And so do keep that in mind as well. Remember, out here again, we have other resources. I mean, you've got some, you know, pretzel stands out there. You've got your information desks, bag check if you want to pay a few dollars. We're not sure the price as of this recording of what that is, but if you're kind of staying far away and you've got some stuff to drop off there, the costume prop check, all of that. Deaf and disabled services, again, with the ADA entry here. Remember, if you have any RFID badge issues, they've got help desks at A and then also down at G. So those are easy to get to. We talked about in our last video the COVID verification wristband. Those are outside and beyond. We gave some tips on that as well. So again, my biggest suggestion for the floor is really trying to have a plan where you divide it up and hit it phase by phase, as we're hearing that there won't be any carpet. And when we talk about carpet, that doesn't mean like out in the halls or like, you know, in the ballrooms or things, but that means every convention that comes into a convention center has the right to, or has the choice of whether or not to pay for carpet to be installed. It sounds like that's not going to be paid for at Comic-Con this year. So as a result, if you've never done a big con without carpet, it really wears you down. So you need to take lots of breaks. And so, you know, if I were, my suggestion would be never trying to take more than a quarter of this floor at any one time. When you add the crowds and the wear and tear on the feet and just all the incredible things that the booths are going to have that you're going to want to take time to look at, you don't want to try to make a plan of like, okay, I'm going to try and hit it all on Sunday or all on Wednesday or something like that. And also remember that Hall H, Ballroom 20 as well, but particularly Hall H a lot of times will help kind of push or pull people away from the floor. So for example, on Saturday when you have, you know, Black Adam in Hall H and you've got, you know, Marvel coming in there, and that's going to cram people in there, chances are it's going to pull a lot of people off the floor, all in all. When that has that whole 7,000 or so people in there, it does a draw. Whereas maybe on a day where it's lighter, you know, like on Thursday, I'm excited about the Masters of the Universe panel, but I don't know that that's going to draw a huge crowd to Hall H. And so a lot of times that'll push more people out this way or to the offsite. So do kind of think about trying to go counter of Hall H if you can, of, you know, planning that in as well. And make sure to know Wednesday nights and Sundays are normally what we find being the busiest on the floor. Not that there's any, you know, times that aren't busy on the floor, but Wednesday night and Sundays, like when everybody's like, I'm gonna get all my shopping done. Wednesday, there's no panels, competition really, or Sunday, it's like, okay, it's the last day, I want to go hit the booth. So make sure not to wear yourself too down and have too much planned into Sunday that it's going to be a drag trying to hit a bunch of those booths. So with that said, we've got a bunch of other videos up on the channel and more to come as we are coming into the home stretch here for Comic-Con. So it's just checking those out. Lots of prep videos, lots of things in the gas lamp as well, looking at offsites. More of those to come as well. We hope you'll like, subscribe, and let people know the type of work that we're doing if you enjoy it. So with that said, we're going to wrap this video up, and until next time, we will see you in line somewhere.